Uh, This is the fourth session of this year's summit, fourth and last. And this one's on various aspects of access to the river. So I would guess that most of those of us who are on have been known to get on a boat and get on the river. And we've got Bill Hart here from Genesee RiverWatch, who's going to speak to the upper river. And I'm going to speak to the river from essentially Letchworth Park to the city. And Jeff Mrozak, who's here from the City Department of Environmental Services, does everything there is to do on the river within the city of Rochester.
It's a big team.
Yeah.
Including Rock the Riverway, and he's going to update us on that. We had Heidi Zimmermeyer scheduled to speak this morning from the Downtown Development Corp on the subject of what the city is doing to capitalize on the changes in the river through the city. Unfortunately, Heidi came down the day before yesterday with COVID and is out of commission for probably at least a week from the sound of things. And then we'll have time available for questions and discussion. Although, since we don't have Heidi, we really have plenty of time during each of the other three speakers' periods to discuss what makes sense. I have something coming in on chat from David. Can you give me permission to record it? Can't record it without host permission.
Okay.
George, you want to respond to that?
All right. I'll see if I can. Not sure exactly how to do that, but let's see under security.
And we are recording anyway, David. So that recording is going to go up on YouTube eventually.
Yep, I'm still looking. That's a new request. I'll see what I can do.
Well, in the meantime, Bill, you want to go back to sharing your map?
Sure, I'll give it my best.
And I should say, Bill is with Genesee RiverWatch, which is our sister organization, largely within Allegheny County, but has been around doing this for a very long time and has a wonderful history of putting access locations and very nice ones along the river. So all yours, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. I think most of you are fairly knowledgeable of who we are, but I'll just give a real quick history. For those who are not, we're about 12 years into this. Me and another guy I won't mention at this point founded the organization in conjunction with the Allegheny County Chamber of Commerce. We were committee on the Commerce and on the Chamber, and then we eventually spun off and formed a not-for-profit and board of directors. And we've had a number of goals, which include the thing called the Triple Divide Trail, which I know some of you've heard about, which will, and I use the verb will, eventually be a trail that runs from Rochester to Williamsport. And we've had various other goals too, environmental, educational. We've worked with a lot of other organizations to get other things going, initiatives, and been very successful with a number of them, which I won't get into now. But obviously the one we're probably best known for is building our Genesee RiverWatch Blue Way Trail, which runs from Genesee, Pennsylvania to Portageville. I've always been an avid canoeist and more recently kayaker ever since I was 16 years old, when a friend of mine called me up and said, "Hey, let's canoe the Genesee River." And his mother dropped us off in Genesee and said, "Well, I'll pick you up in Rochester. Call me when you get there." And we made it. And that was the beginning of my love of the Genesee River. Took us 5 days, by the way, to get there. And so anyway, our like I said, our goal has been to build river access. When I moved, part of the reason I live here in Allegheny County is because of that trip. I just found so much beauty and nature. I'm originally from Rochester. I grew up in Brighton, but I decided I wanted to live in Allegheny County, moved down here and bought a small farm. And in the last, like I said, in the last 12 years, we've been trying to build this Blue Way Trail. And before this, there really was not river access on the Genesee River on the upper Genesee. I mean, yes, there were places where you could pull off the highway and kind of say, well, looks like we can drag a canoe down here, which we used to do. Of course, this is all before kayaks came along. There was, a park in Wellsville called Island Park, which maybe you could launch in. There was a park in Genesee, but there was no signage, no parking, no. You always felt like you were, violating somebody's private property or doing something that was quasi illegal. So when we founded Genesee River Wilds, one of my goals was to create river access, not just for canoe and kayak, but for fishermen, which is pretty big down here. I'm sure many of you are aware of that. There's bird watchers. There's people who like to swim. There's a lot of people who treat the river like a beach. They'll go down with lounge chairs and inflatables and spend the day floating around in the river and swimming. So the access is on many different levels. There's some people that just go down, like to sit along the river. They like to, or walk along the river. So the access is very important. And in the last 12 years, we've kind of put together a goal. As you can see on the map, right now we're at about 20 different proposed sites. About 10 of them are active, and maybe 7 or 8 of them have signage and parking. So we've definitely made some progress. And I've got to say, it's been very successful. I mean, the number of people who are using the river, accessing the river, enjoying the river, appreciating the river, and more importantly, now have a stake in the river, has grown markedly. And this has been one of our goals, because when we sat down and we said, well, first and most importantly, we obviously want to protect the river, and we want people to understand what they have here. Second and most importantly, we want people to be able to enjoy the river and access the river. And by doing so, being a poor county, we're one of the poorest counties in the state. I don't know how many people know that, but we are. We want to attract dollars to the area as well. And certainly recreation is the one thing that can grow in our area, and has been. While we've watched a number of our manufacturers slowly drift away in the last couple of decades, tourism and recreation has consistently grown. And I would like to think our river access sites has a lot to do with that, or at least partially to do with that. But anyway, yeah, it has been very successful. You can often see people on Route 19, which is the road that runs along the river down here. There's a lot of cars going up and down, trucks with kayaks, people with canoes. A lot of times our parking sites are full. So we have been very successful with that. That being said, we still feel like we have a long way to go. I obviously any group and always, I think you always feel a certain amount of anxiety that yes, you've accomplished a lot, but there's always more to do. And you know, for the last 3, 4, or 5 years, I've been feeling that quite a bit. Due to lack of funds, we've kind of spun our wheels quite a bit, and lack of participation. I recently so I finally decided it was time to bring in new blood, and I stepped down as president. And we've lost some of our founding board members, but in the last year, we have a new young president that's actually under 30 years old, and we have more and more young people on the board. So I'm feeling pretty excited about that. They're green, they make a lot of mistakes, but I think the group has a future. And we also just received a bequest from one of our board members that passed away that's going to put some dollars in our bank account, and I think it's going to allow us to hire a director, which to me is very exciting. So anyway, enough on the history of Genesee River Wilds. I know we're here to talk about river access. If you look at the map, you can see all the different sites that are either proposed or open. This map's a little bit on the older side, so it's changed a little bit. All of those sites are actually usable at this point. Pretty much all of the green ones are definitely open and running. And most of the purple ones are open and running as well. There's a kind of a smorgasbord of different ways we've created these sites. A couple of them are private. Most of them are partnerships with towns, villages, or the county. And actually one is out of the state in Genesee, Pennsylvania, which is in a park down there. We've currently have 2 sites under development, and I'll talk about those more when we get down there. I think I'm gonna start in Genesee, Pennsylvania, and kind of work our way north. I'm sure you all probably know the Genesee River starts in the Triple Divide, and we've actually put kayaks into the river when it's in a place where it's 8 feet wide, and kayak down to, it's about, I don't know, 6 miles above Genesee, Pennsylvania. And that part of the river, you can only do it in high water, but it's kind of fun. It's like an amusement park ride, very windy and very fast. You got to duck down with limbs over your head. And then once you reach Genesee, Pennsylvania, there is a town park there. And we partnered with a town park. It was kind of it was a little bit tough at first because some of the park members didn't see the value in having a river access site there, and they didn't like the idea of the extra expense, and they didn't know if they wanted people coming into their park for this kind of thing. But eventually we convinced them. We helped them open an access site. They built a little parking area. There's a kiosk there. There's a little ramp with a rubber mat that leads down the river. Down at that point is probably 40 feet wide. So, we're talking about a whole different river than you guys down in Rochester. But very lovely, very nice part of the river. The trip from Genesee to Wellsville is probably my favorite trip, and it's very wild. There's not a lot of farms. There's very few people. The river meanders a lot. Lots of birds, lots of wildlife. You would never, you feel like you're in a very different place than most of the other part of the river. And there's not a lot of erosion on that part of the river as well. It's because the farmers have not damaged the riparian borders. The river's in pretty good shape. From there, you can see there's so anyway, that is an established site, and it's up and running, and a lot of people put in there. From there, you can see Shango, Graves, York's Corners, Jack Bridge. Those are pretty much, I'm trying to think. I think those are three out of the four of those are what we call DEC sites. They are sites that the DEC built before we even showed up. They had small parking areas, a little sign describing what you could and couldn't do, and those have been used. I don't know, for quite a while for fishermen. And we originally went to the DEC and said, geez, we'd love to partner with you guys and have river access here as well. And they weren't too excited about it at first, but after Kathy Young, who was our state senator, was very much on our side, and she called a meeting with some of the local DEC officials, and now we've got a yearly renewable agreement to partner with them. We've yet to get our signs up there. We're in the process of working on that now, but they're on our maps, and people do use them for access. The next one up is called Trout Run. It's a private site. We actually have backed out of our partnership with him. He's a Rochesterian. He came down here and bought a campsite. Done a great job with it. He's got, he's invested a few $1 million into the campsite and has really brought a lot of enterprise to the area. But it's become, it's just too hard to get in and out. He's got too many people, and so we've kind of backed out of that one. There's certainly plenty of people that access the river though, but it's from his private campsite. So that one's kind of out of the circle of our access sites. From there, it's called the RiverWalk site, and that is in a plaza. It's one of Allegheny County's two little shopping plazas. There's a big parking lot, a Tops grocery store, some other businesses, and that's actually a very nice site because the RiverWalk trail, which is a little trail they built when they built the plaza, goes right through there. Very nice parking, great access. I know, Mike, you've been there. I don't know, George. I don't know if George, you've been there, but it's a nice place to get in. The river's deep, and it's, there's a mowed area. So that one's been very successful. The LC Whitford Corporation's been very supportive with our building of that, and they're one of our they contribute on a yearly basis. They're a host for that site, and that's where we will be starting our annual float, which is coming up at the end of June. It's just a great place because there's plenty of parking, and you can line up the kayaks or canoes. I think last year we had almost 50 lined up along there, and then we're going to end in the Amity site, which you can see is a little bit further down, which is also quite nice. Okay, the next one is Riverside Park, again a private site, which was a campground. They were all gung-ho. We built the site, put in a kiosk, and then the same thing. They decided they had too much going on. They didn't like our traffic going through their campground, so we're in the process of withdrawing from that site. But it's really not a problem. We've got plenty of access along the river, and it's been congenial. We were a little upset because we invested a lot of money in building a kiosk and getting around the maps and blah, blah, blah. But it's fine. And what we're gonna replace it with the SIO site, which is just north of there. That again is a DEC fishing site. We've got approval to build. It's kind of steep there, so we're going to build some stairs. They're not into the river. They're kind of down, bring you down off the parking area, and then you can walk from the river from there. The parking there is pretty good. We've got the sign made, so that will kind of replace the Riverside Park site. From there, you can see the Amity site. The Amity site is a partnership with the Belmont Fire Company. Used to be the Amity Rod and Gun. They went under. The fire department bought it. They were struggling to keep it up, so we offered to partner with them, which they were more than happy to do, and it's a great partnership. They're excited that we're there. We help keep the place up. You know, we've had a few events there, which we actually pay them for to do. There's plenty of parking. There's a covered eating area. There's great river access. We have a informational kiosk there. Big maples and oak trees. It's a pretty little park and a great place to get in and out. North of there, you actually enter the village of Belmont, which is the county seat. There's a dam that with a waterfall just before the town. So if you're going to go through there, you have to portage. But right on the other side, there's a little fireman's park there that was built. It's kind of it's in honor of the veterans. There's a couple different monuments there, but there is a little stairway that leads down to the river, and that gives you river access there. And we've partnered with them. We have a handshake agreement to use that, and we don't have any signage there, but it's pretty obvious that that's where you want to get in if you go there. From there, the Belvedere site. Belvedere is an older village in Allegheny County that's more or less disappeared, at least the residential part of it. Belvedere is where 86 crosses 19. We call it the crossroads. It's the busiest intersection in the county. There's a new convenience store, gas station there quickly that was just recently been built. Quite a big deal for our area. The county part of the county office complex is located there. Tourism and a lot of the other offices are out there. They've got a nice building that was originally Houghton. Houghton had a elementary school there, which didn't really work out, so they sold it to the county. And we've previously had our offices there. We hope to have our office there again in the future. It's got, you know, it's right pretty much in the heart of it's the center of the county, busiest intersection. So it's got a lot of leverage. Unfortunately, the Belvedere access is there's the Belvedere Mansion is there, which is where Philip Church lived. He was a very historical figure relative to Alexander Hamilton, and so it's a little complicated. I won't get into it, but eventually we will have an access site there, but it's in the works. Going north from there is a place called Transit Bridge. First bridge built over the Genesee River, I think anywhere. I think even before Rochester. Don't hold me to that, but it was a wooden bridge, obviously, and it has a great access site. We're partnering with the village of Angelica. They're the actual owners of that piece of land, and it's a little complicated because the village is actually 3 or 4 miles away from there, but they they had electric lines or something that went through there, so they had that piece of land. So they've been very good partners. We have a private landscape guy that does all the mowing and keeps it up for us for no charge. So the maintenance on that is covered. We can park about 20 cars. There's a church right next door that has more parking, and they don't mind. So we can get, if we want to park there too, we can get 30 or 40 cars in there, which we've had at times. So that is a very key important site. That part of the river from Transit on down is nice because it's good more beginners type. The upper Genesee is a little bit more tricky. There's a lot more strainers, tricky places to get through, where once you get to Transit Bridge, it's not too bad. From there on down, it's not too bad. So you get more of the floating crowd that gets in there that likes to, have a few beers and enjoy their trip, where the more serious kayakers are on the upper Genesee. The Belfast site is right next to the Belfast Bridge. It's again a lovely site. The Belfast Bridge was just closed a couple of months ago. It's about 50 years old. It was built after the flood of 72, which, by the way, the 50th anniversary is on June 21st. And I don't know if it's really something to celebrate considering how much damage it caused, but it's certainly something to remember and say it could happen again. It certainly is something that's impressed in all the memories of people here in Allegheny County. Everybody's got their flood stories, including myself. So the Belfast site is open, and I think will remain open because the bridge project, we're kind of up a little bit from the bridge. There probably will be a time when it's going to have to close for a little bit, but at this point, we are going to try to partner with I believe it's the state replacing the bridge. I'm not sure. It's either the state or the county. We haven't gotten that far yet, but we're going to partner with them to build a whole new site. And that should be very exciting, because the Belfast site, again, is one of our key sites. A lot of people get in and out there. You can either get in to go to Fillmore, or you can get out if you're coming from Transit Bridge or Amity or even Wellsville if you want a whole long day. Right next to town, you can run up to the grocery store. You can run to the bar and have a drink if you want to do that, but it's a good site. It's a very good site.
In the meantime, you got to come at it from Transit Bridge, right, Bill?
Well, yeah, any of the upstream sites you can. Because of the closed bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can, because the bridge is closed, you can't access directly from 19. But if you can drive down to Transit, it's about 5 miles down, and then come up. There's another way to come from the north, from Canada, but that's a bit more complicated. So I would, if you want to access in Belfast, come up from Transit. Canada site we built. We're partnered with the town of Canada. They maintain it. Nice parking, kiosk, picnic tables, there's a memorial there. You can access, there's 2 different access sites. Unfortunately, as many of you know, it's eroding very quickly. We're another good flood and we may lose it. So hopefully, I don't know if we want to talk about that today, but we need to do something about that. Council House Road is another bridge that's just north of Canada. Modern bridge. There is access there, county land. We need to develop that. People get in and out there already, and it's a nice place to get in and out. Lots of fishermen at that site too. A lot of fishermen. From there north, there's a place called Lattice Bridge, which is a 120-year-old bridge or 110-year-old bridge, closed, pretty bad shape, but we do have a a somewhat of a plan drawn up to turn that into an access area and reopen the bridge for fishing and walking over it. The steel is still good enough for that. Very lovely part of the river. We're at that point, you're starting to get into the Letchworth style of geography, the shale ledges. There's a little waterfall that, you know, you can go over in your kayak or canoe very easily. It's about a foot high, but it's that area. So that has a lot of potential as well. The Fillmore site has been probably the most controversial in the last couple of years. Again, a very important key site on our Blue Way Trail. For decades and maybe even centuries, the Fillmore site has been used as a recreational area for the town of Fillmore. They call it Fillmore Beach. People would fish, swim, canoe, kayak, party, relax, and big stone beach with a big sweeping part of the river. And the owner of it was always kind of, oh, okay, I don't care, just you know, don't make a mess. And he was very agreeable to the whole thing. And then he sold it. And in the selling process, we begged the town to buy it. They didn't buy it. We tried to buy it. We couldn't. We actually had an offer on it, and we got beat out. And the private owners, the new owners, bought it and closed it. And it was a huge shock to the town. I mean, it was why the town didn't see this better, I don't know, but they missed the point. So what we've done, there's a bridge, another bridge there that goes over the river, and what we've done is approach the county, which owns the bridge and a lot of the land around it. Obviously, you know, a lot of times the county has to have access areas. And there was an older bridge just north of there that was torn down when they built the new bridge. So the county has a sizable piece of land just north of the current bridge. So we're in the process of making a deal with the county to put access in there. We would still love to get the old Fillmore Beach back. We actually talked about approaching the owners and seeing if we can't come up with a plan, you know, because it really, the owners, their idea, I think, is to put a hunting camp up on the other part of the land. I don't think they would care about the river part. So that part's kind of a mess, and we would hopefully can improve that. But in the meantime, it looks like we're going to have a nice access site there. So that part is solved. From there, you go north. There's that from Fillmore to Whiskey Bridge is a very wild part of the river. And many of you know there's a wildlife area there. There's some farms, lots of wildlife. We've looked at access sites all along there, and we haven't had much luck coming up with a site, but there are a few prospective sites. There's one guy there, he's a Rochesterian, he owns a piece of land right on the border of the two counties. And he's looking to potentially donate that land to someone or something, or some entity, I guess I should say. So that's a work in progress. If we can find a way to turn that into something, maybe the Conservancy can take it over something. That would be a terrific access site, and that's right between Portageville and Fillmore. So that would solve our access problems along there. I know, talking to the owner, he's complained that everybody gets in and out in front of his property there illegally, and he's pretty good about it. But he's recently had to put signs up because people leave beer cans or create a chaotic situation there. So that's been a bit of a problem. We've approached the wildlife area there, and they're not interested in putting a site in. So um, that right now, that's kind of an area we're working on. Whiskey Bridge, there's access there. That's where the Finger Lakes Trail meets the big the Greenway Trail, the big north south trail. There's it's again, there's some controversy there. It's not in our county, so we haven't really been paying attention, but I know there's some little bit of controversy in Livingston County about that. I guess at this point, I'm going to have to say I don't know what's going on. I know you can still get in and out there, but there is a little bit of controversy. In Portageville, again, there is access there. It's not in our county, so we haven't been paying attention. But you can get in and out of there. In fact, you have to get out there because the falls are right after that.
Yeah, you better not miss that site.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll be glad to keep talking and tell you more, but I think that gives you a pretty good overview of river access in Allegheny County, which is it actually includes Pennsylvania and somewhat of Livingston County. For the most part, we're open for business. And I think we've got the future looks pretty bright right now with the money coming into our coffers. We've obviously partnered with you guys on a few things, and I think we're here for the long run. We're working with Houghton College. Actually, I skipped we're opening a site in Houghton too, which is not on the map, which is between Canada and Lattice Bridge up that way. So we have a site there as well. We're working with a lot of the towns and villages along the river. There's we have the big proposal for money to come in to develop the entire riverfront in the whole county. So it's a long-term project. I'm sure you're aware of that, but that's pretty much it. So if you have some questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Bill, I was wondering about the in Belmont, the access on the downstream side of the dam at near Phillips Creek, just downstream there a little bit. It's a kind of an unofficial site?
Yep.
Is there some issue with that being turned into a regular site?
That we've looked at too, and that is one of those kind of works in progress. You have to go across some private property to get there. So people use it. And at this point, it is kind of one of those gray areas where if you know it's open, you can go, but we can't really put up a sign and say open for business there.
Right.
The Fireman's Park, yes, which is on the west side of the river, just next to the bridge, that you can go in.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
And we've got a proposal into the Kodak Trust for a stream bank stabilization project in Canada that would include upgrading that access point as well.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Is there any new news on that, Mike? Or
no, not yet. No, it doesn't seem like it. They've just been dragging out. They've changed leadership on the trustees and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and just things have been dragging along for forever. I would hope we could hear this year, but I thought that last year. So
yeah, I tell you, another big flood, and there's not going to be much left there.
Yeah, it's not getting any better.
Yeah, the river just charges right into that bank, and I mean, when we built that park, the kiosk was probably, 150 feet, 200 feet from the river, and now it's down to about 50. So,
yeah. Wow, I didn't realize it.
Big change.
That much.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a bad spot.
A bad spot. but you know, I think this, I think I think our part is one of the more exciting parts of the river to canoe and kayak, and not that the rest of the river isn't nice too, but it, you know, we do have a lot of wild areas. We have some white water. We have a lot of little towns and villages along the way, which you can stop at. I mean, you could potentially even stay in some of them. That was kind of, and there, we do have some cabins going up along the river for overnight stays. There's one guy between Belfast and Canadias. I think he's got 5 cabins perched right on the river. Beautiful little, they got little grills, and he's got a public, like one restroom. They don't have bathrooms in the cabins, but there's a bathhouse which everybody can use. There's some Airbnbs popping up. So if somebody wanted to make a 2 or 3 day journey along the river, there's places to stay. And that's kind of one thing we're hoping to push a little bit, is the longer stays where you make an actual tour of the river from Genesee to Fillmore or Portageville or something like that.
Well, thanks, Bill.
Any other questions?
I don't think so. I was just, since I'm on next, I was going to answer David's question also, if I can find it here. You can't see my screen yet, right?
Bill's got to stop his share.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is fine. Oh, where did I put that? Press releases. 19. Let's see if I've got it here.
You looking to answer Dave Bunker's?
Pardon?
You looking to answer Dave's question about navigability, or?
Yeah, I was going to bring up the Blue Way map, but
I recommended he take a look at it. It doesn't necessarily answer that question though about navigability. I mean, there's a certain point in the upper river where the flow gets so low you can't really go there, Bill, right?
No, right. That's true.
Yes and no. The one thing about like from Genesee, Pennsylvania to Wellsville or to Amity, even though the river is small, doesn't really mean it's not navigable, because it still has a lot of its native riparian border. It's kept the river deep, even though it may not be very wide. So it's, you know, it's navigable. I mean, my contention is, no matter how low the river is, it's always navigable. It's just how many times you want to get out and walk.
Right.
Yeah, right.
You know, everybody says, "Oh, you can't possibly go." I said, I've been down the river when it's absolutely lowest, and I've still made it. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
You just got to get out. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mike,
All
I need to keep going here.
Yep. I'll do this somewhat quickly if I can. In answer to David's question, if you do go to the website, you can get this map, and you can download it and print it. There's also an interactive version of it, the Genesee River Blue Way map, and it doesn't show times, but it shows mileage.
Yep. And it has pictures of each site, what it looks like to get in there. So,
Yep, on the interactive version.
Yep.
Right. So that said, let me go to
Little buddy.
I'll stop that one, and I'll start hopefully this one. Okay, so Middle River, and I'm talking really Mount Morris to the city here. And new in 2021, actually I think built in 2020, but they had some problems with ironing out some issues there, and they didn't open it till last year. They built a new access point, town of Mount Morris did, just downstream from the RG&E dam and power plant. And it's, as you can see, it's a pretty fancy structure. Got terrific parking, got restrooms over there to the left in the top picture, and then a 3-stage walkway down to the river. And that certainly makes it nicer than having to drag your kayak across the grass and fight your way down a bank. We have a couple of sites, Avon and Geneseo, that have been approved by the Kodak Environmental Trust that we referred to a little while ago for $87,000. Approved, we've been told it's kind of on a monthly basis that we're going to see the contracts. Hopefully we'll get them and be able to complete it this year, although probably very late in the boating season if we do. That's what the current state is in Avon. As you can see, there's a parking area up here and a bunch of steps, and then a landing area. But boy, if the river was enough to use that landing area, you know, it'd be tough to get in your boat that fast. And then a real drop off. And Geneseo, a muddy culvert really that runs down into the river from a quite nice park area that adjoins the Geneseo wastewater treatment plant. The plan is to, George, you want to talk about that for a minute? I have to step away for just a second.
Yeah,
You
actually,
can
I'm not sure.
describe what's actually going to get done.
Yep. Okay, yeah, well, what we're going to do is on both those sites to try to keep a simple type of access there, do some grading work for both of those that we're get a more gradual slope down to the river with some type of treads of some kind so you can walk down or whatever. We haven't quite decided on that yet. That's all part of the design that we'll get into in final. Mike, when Mike comes back, there's a couple more views there of the transitions. They, you know, the one at the Avon it goes down 15 feet in about 15 feet. So it's pretty steep. So that's going to be graded to make it smoother so you can get in and out of there. And the Geneseo one the same way. We're just waiting for some contract snags that we're trying to get straight with federal systems to get that fixed. So hopefully we'll do that. Mike, you want to just switch to the next slide real quick there? And
yep. This is the site plan for Avon.
yeah, you can see there's existing steps there that were in the picture. And the idea is from that point down is to do some grading, do some stonework in the river and put some type of either a boat slide or some other thing that makes it a little bit easier to get a canoe or kayak down there. All that's subject to, you know, final design and discussions with DEC because they have ideas of how they'd like to see it too. But we haven't started that work yet until we get approval of funds.
And just for reference, it's Route 20, right? I believe, George?
Yes,
it runs
right
along
over the river.
top of this site and crosses the Genesee on a bridge.
Right.
Just above the plan.
Yeah.
And then Geneseo, pardon?
Yeah, go to the next one. Did you have one for, yeah, you had one for Geneseo.
Yeah.
You can see the park part that Mike was talking about, and there is some reasonable grading down to the point where Mike's picture was, but again, that was a very steep drop off and very difficult to get up or down. So we're going to try to make that gradual and put some type of treads or whatever it is, whatever seems appropriate at that point, plus protection in the river so you can get your canoe or kayak in and out of there relatively easy. So they're not complicated projects, but as soon as we get the funding, we'll be at it. So
yeah, and in both cases, the real problem, you know, you can get down the hill. At worst, you could line your boat down the hill and line it back up. We've done both of those. But getting out and getting in other than the lowest of water is a real difficulty because there's nowhere to stand.
yeah.
And for reference, the wastewater treatment plant for Geneseo is right down here below the parking area. There is upstream a bit of interesting whitewater as well in a washed out dam that can be either difficult if the water is low, or I imagine if the water is high enough, you'd never see it.
Yep, good.
So, and we'll talk about it later. I also wanted to talk about the public paddling program for this year. We've done this each year since 2016, I think, in one form or another, in conjunction with the Waterways Center in the city of Rochester. They supply the boats and the logistics. Essentially, we supply the guides. This year, we're going to do things a little differently on Saturday the 11th, and George will be shepherding that one. We have beginner training and intermediate paddlers leaving from the Waterway Center, more than likely going up Red Creek. And I say beginner training because one of the things we found out, particularly last year, was we had a lot of people coming out to these events this was their first time in a kayak or their first time in a canoe. And they really had no idea what they were doing out there. And then at the same time, we had people who did know what they were doing and wanted to go see the sights. It was kind of unfair to the latter group that we were spending a great deal of time trying to teach the former group basic paddling techniques. So this year we're saying on two events, we're going to focus on teaching beginners, although we'll have the ability for the more skilled people to join us and go on their way. And then the rest of the time, we're going to insist that you at least have a knowledge of how to get in a boat, get out of a boat, and how to control the boat when you arrive, so we don't have to teach you on the fly. So we're going to do that, both of those off the Waterways Center, because it's a more controlled area, and unless you had a terrifically windy day, you've got a nice wide part of the river with very low water speed to teach people. Then the July events on the 17th, we will leave and return to the new Petton Street dock just above the O'Rourke Bridge in the lower river. The August event, we're back with beginner training at the Waterways Center. Saturday, we will return to the lower river again. And for anybody who hasn't done that, that is a particularly beautiful place, because you get up from the immediate harbor area and you're essentially into wilderness. You'd have no idea you're in a city as you go up toward Lower Falls. And then the final event, Sunday, October 2nd, which is Rock the River weekend. Again, we will be in the lower river, but the plan there, COVID permitting, is that we'll return to what we were doing 3 years ago, and that is meet people at Petton Street, transport them up to Seth Green via small bus, city bus. The recreation department will provide, and then do a one-way paddle from Lower Falls down to the harbor. That, in my mind, is by far the preferable way to do it, because you don't have to see the same thing twice. It's all downstream, so you don't have to worry about current, although sometimes the winds come from the lake and blow up river, and that's tougher to counteract than the current is. But you also get to see more of the river on a one-way paddle than if you tried to do a round trip in the same amount of time, obviously. The other change from last year, which actually goes back a little bit to the a couple of years ago is we're going to have lifeguards on all these paddles. And we're also going to insist that people sign liability releases, because we were pretty lax about that last year. And frankly, we got away with it. And we took more risks than we should have. And then the pricing, when I put the slide together 2 days ago, it was still being discussed, but the pricing will be $25 a person per event. And I believe we're going to have double kayaks and single kayaks available. So a double kayak would be $50 for 2 people. I think that has been shown to keep it within a reasonable range for people to experience something they could not otherwise experience. And none of these events are closed. If somebody knows what they're doing, has their own boat, wants to tag along, that's fine with us. And some of these places are fascinating to see on a beautiful day. There's nothing quite like being on the lower river, with all respect to the equal beauty of the upper river and its different experience up there. So a tremendous amount of history in both areas, and that's one of our roles as guides on this, is to talk about what the history is of the river. The lower river, for example, being the terminus of the Underground Railroad and having the cross lake coal trade and the huge amount of infrastructure that was constructed to support that. The canals that were in existence, the canal that followed the river, which was then replaced by a railroad in the canal bed years ago. All of that is visible on these trips, and we'll talk about it with the people who come with us. And that's it for that one. So I will sign off and let Jeff take over.
You can hear me okay?
Can
Yep.
indeed.
All right. And you can see my image?
Yep.
All right. All right. So I'm earlier introductions. I'm Jeff Morozak, Senior Landscape Architect for the city. Born and raised in Rochester. Been employed with the city going on 27 years now. Hard to say that. Hard to believe it goes by that quick, but well, a lot of history working on the river. Parks, trails, anything along the river we've worked on. And heavily involved in the Rock the Riverway program. So I'll be able to take you through basically how the Rock the Riverway program came about, where it stands now, both completed projects, in construction projects, projects that are in design, and then finally get to the question of where can I actually paddle on the river in the city of Rochester. So hopefully you've all heard about the Rock the Riverway program. It's been a pretty high profile undertaking with heavy state involvement and partnership. A lot of projects coming online and in the works. So if you come downtown and you're along the river, more than likely you're in a Rock the Riverway project. So what area are we talking about? So the city of Rochester, actually city boundary is actually south of the New York State Canal in the south. Can you guys see my hand pointer here?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, all right. I like to use that to point things out, but city property is actually, city boundary actually goes south, south of the canal, narrow channels along the narrow sections along the river. So between the New York State Canal and this is actually, the Genesee Riverway to downtown till you get to Court Street is actually a navigable channel the entire way. It's actually part of the New York State Canal system. It's the Erie Harbor. for the New York State Canal System. It's one of their recommended paddles as people are traveling with paddles or, boat excursions as you're traveling along the canal. So I'll discuss, paddling opportunities, largely in this full section. Obviously, the major milestones along the way from the south to the north at Genesee Valley Park and University of Rochester, Mount Hope Cemetery on the east bank, continuing up to Genesee Gateway Park that carries the Genesee Riverway Trail along the river. And then up north, High Falls and Rochester Running Track Bridge. The Rock the Riverway program basically addresses the area in the north from the Rochester Running Track Bridge south to this vacuum oil site. And you'll see additional images of those later on, but there are, paddling and put in opportunities down in Genesee Valley Park that Mike mentioned earlier with Genesee Waterway Center. So, really quick background, you look at the zoomed out aerial image of Rochester, people would question, why are you not on the lake like Toronto or Buffalo or Oswego? And that's largely solely because of the power of the river, especially in the downtown section. People settled here to tap that power to run their mills and start their industries. On this image to the right, you can see the Johnson Seymour Mill race. You can still see water still flows through it today. I'll show you pictures of that later. But that was the first mill race in Rochester that powered a mill just north of the current aqueduct building. Obviously, Brown's race tapped water from the river above the High Falls, channeled it into all the industries in the High Falls district. And, a series of canals. Obviously, the Erie Canal came through downtown, passed across Broad Street on that aqueduct before it was rerouted south of the city through Genesee Valley Park. You have Feeder Canal that fed water to the Erie Canal from the rapids at Brooks Landing up to the confluence with the canal. This west side canal was the Genesee Valley Canal. Actually came up through along the river all the way from the southern tier, came up through the city of Rochester, through Genesee Valley Park, up along the West River, follows somewhat the path of the now Ford Street. And this is Main Street now, West Main, Susan B. Anthony neighborhood. And you had a pretty large basin here at what is now the Morris Lumber Yard, where the Genesee Valley Canal connected to the Erie Canal. Basically, as soon as it was complete, it was defunct. Railroads were starting to take over shipping and transportation. So that was a short-lived, but that is now the Genesee Valley Greenway from Genesee Valley Park south. So fantastic ride. I think last year we did a ride down to Avon, just some spectacular scenery through that length. But Rochester's history being of industry and being a largely untamed river, we turned our back to it. It was not something that, especially in the downtown section, was not something that was desired other than for its purposes of power. So the picture on the left, that's the Main Street Bridge. You go out there today, obviously you get beautiful views up and down the river, but you can see the built environment right up to the river. Turned our back to it, you couldn't even see it. You wouldn't even know it was there coming through downtown most of the time. Front Street on the right here, pretty rough and tumble old section, lots of bars and trouble happened there. And then the image on the left, High Falls in the background, Pontchartrain Bridge, and basically everything on the east bank here, the right side or west bank, east side of the river here, west side of the river. RG&E's power generation plants, coal gasification plants. That's now relatively a cleared site, some environmental cleanup to do down there, and we'll look at the project that's upcoming in that area as well. And then east side of the river on the upper bank, Genesee Brewery and other industries. That, the brewery's still there, obviously. So coming into the 80s, city realized that the river is an asset. It's something to capitalize on, something used for recreation, multimodal transportation. It's an asset. We need to start capitalizing on it. At this time, started planning for, full-scale recreational programming and access to the riverfront, as well as development, river frontage development through the South River Corridor, mid to late 80s, with the South River Corridor land use and development plan. And this also kind of sparked the boom in our trail development. This plan led directly to the South River Corridor trail development. If you go out to the river today, there are seamless connections on both sides of the river, from the canal up to Court Street. Some beautiful loops you can make there through, the 5 or 6 pedestrian or roadway bridges that cross. And also Maplewood Park section was constructed in this time. And obviously many more miles of off-road and some on-road trail connecting, basically everything north to south along the riverway through the city of Rochester. Later in the 80s, early 90s, the High Falls Entertainment District, that's the image on the left, and Urban Cultural Park, the New York State Urban Cultural Park, came online. So really a recognition of how important the river was, and to readdress it as an asset and not see it as a danger anymore, with the implementation of Mount Morris Dam and channelization of the river through Rochester. The flooding issues went away, and it was something that, wasn't seen as dangerous anymore. It was actually something we could capitalize on. Progressing through 2000, 2010 to 2010, 2015, just gives you a snapshot of all of the, a lot of these are city-led plans, studies, projects, but, an equal number of them are private development. I won't go through all of them, but in total, you're looking at, in that 15-year span, $600 million in those dollars of the day, of all these different projects, planned studies, actual construction projects, implemented projects, both public and private. Shortly after that, the city started updating its local waterfront revitalization plan. Basically, the city's vision of its entire waterfront. The prior version that was being updated only really addressed the section south of Rochester, the navigable waterway, and the section, north of Lower Falls, the sections that were navigable. The new updated LDRP needed to address every length of the waterfront. So the full Lake Ontario frontage, the entire Genesee Riverway, navigable or not, or Genesee River frontage, navigable or not, and also included the frontage of the Erie Canal as it passed through Rochester on the southern end. So as that was being developed, we knew all those projects. Big internal team was working on the LWRP update. We knew all the projects that were happening, specifically downtown, the South River Corridor, and realized that the LWRP was a great tool, and it set the stage for the big picture that we needed, unfortunately, largely in word, but we had no way to visually represent a lot of those, downtown and South River Corridor projects that were represented in the LWRP. And we were able to convince, council and the administration to give us a very small pot of money to do a planning exercise that led to the Rock the Riverway. So a team of about 8 to 10 city staff from all different departments, planning, zoning, neighborhood and business development, engineering, structures, worked with Bergman Associates over basically a 6-month time frame to map out a series of 27 to 30 projects, expanding from that Rochester Running Track Bridge in the north to the Vacuum Oil Boa area in the south. And really conceptual visualization of all these sites, really conceptual cost estimating, just to give us a document that we could use to start shopping this around and say, this is the visual representation of what we would like to do, and start using it to raise funding. Basically bringing people to the river, establishing the river as the centerpiece of downtown, leveraging public dollars to encourage private investment, boost the economy, and create jobs, producing seamless multimodal access along both sides of the river, creating formal programming, both recreational and educational throughout the Riverway, generating a 4-season, 24-hour waterfront with world-class public spaces and amenities, and providing opportunities to attract more visitors to the Riverway and downtown destinations. So like I said, we had, I think, 27 to 30 projects throughout the Riverway corridor. Total estimate at the time was $500 million to implement all those projects. And basically the consultant, using their magic formulas for economic development impacts, came up with a figure of $2.8 billion of economic impact building off that $500 million investment. And, that's obviously with the private development and tourism, all the other aspects that come along with, this improved development. So once we had that, visual document that actually, wasn't just a written description of what we were going to do, which is hard to sell anybody on. We actually had that visual document that we could sell, really sell this Rock the Riverway. We actually took it right to New York State upon completion, late 2017, and the state was on board right from the beginning. Immediately committed $50 million to fund the first phase of implementation, and actually jumped right into the process by leading a public visioning process, to help the city and the public, roll out the Rock the Riverway plan at large, but to figure out how to prioritize that funding, and ended up in development of the 2018 vision plan. And you can see these objectives. The South River Corridor, basically downtown south to the south, focuses on waterfront access, amenities, and programming that brings people to the river and increases boating activity. So this process was led by the state and a board of 12 local community members with connections to different aspects of the river and development along the river. With a 4-month process with pretty incredible 30+ community meetings in a 4-month time frame. Is some of those were just reaching out to individual community groups. Some were online Zoom meetings. Others were huge in-person kind of design charrettes with big scrolls rolled on the tables and walls. So a very intensive, short duration process that ultimately led to the vision plan and identification of 13 projects as the first phase 1 implementation. So between the $50 million commitment from the state, cities committed contributions to these projects, as well as some other funding from the state that we already had in hand, it worked out to be a greater than an $80 million commitment to implement the phase 1 improvements. And I'll walk you through a number of these projects to show you what's completed, what's still to come, what's in design, is some of the later slides here. So the full vision, South River Corridor, these are the funded projects through phase 1 in the South River Corridor. You got the Genesee Gateway Park and Cornhill Navigation, not Cornhill Navigation. West River Wall was a later addition, which received additional state funding. Vacuum Oil BOA is a 15-year exercise in planning and environmental remediation that I'll talk about in a little bit, but that's underway. The section through downtown, the skate park, Rundell Library Terrace, Convention Center, Riverway Main to Andrews East and West. Aqueduct Reimagined is kind of the linchpin of the whole project that I'll talk about quickly. Blue Cross Arena, and then the High Falls section with High Falls Terrace Park, Brewery Line Trail, the Pontorens Bridge, and Running Track Bridge, and the High Falls Gorge Park. This area that's RG&E and Bausch & Lomb owned now, that's slated to become parkland. So basically, this is an overall representation of the vision: the park improvements, new parks and public spaces, trail upgrades, new trail connections, infrastructure improvements, public facility upgrades, and private development sites. This kind of just shows the comprehensive efforts at unifying the river frontage throughout this whole corridor and what we're working towards at this point. So I'll walk you through a bunch of slides of projects that are completed. Under construction are the red, completed are the blue, and then the in design are the coming soon projects. So completed, Promenade at Erie Harbor. The building you see in the foreground is the old railroad station, now the Dinosaur Barbecue. So this is Court Street right here. Rundell Library is just to the north. This project was done with some state dollars, Rock the Riverway dollars, additional Department of State funding. And this was developed in conjunction with the private development that happened behind in Nathaniel, one of our newer building and developments downtown on the river. So, you know, with our commitment to develop this and develop the Rock the Riverway and projects like this Promenade project, that spurred this development. I don't have the dollar value of that, but you know, it's a significant investment and definitely capitalizing on the river frontage and the incredible views from that point. Rock City Skate Park, fantastic project, early big win for the city and the Rock the Riverway program. I believe it's 12,000 square foot of skatable area. Some land, this is actually on DOT property. Obviously 490 is the big flyover overpass here and the on and off ramps. Really not usable for anything else. So to be able to capitalize on this open space and put in something so impactful as, you know, this significant skate park was a win-win all around. Unfortunately, we opened it the fall before COVID. We opened it, you know, obviously people were chomping at the bit to get on here. We're jumping the fence while it was still under construction to get in an early ride. Opened it up, had beautiful weather. The only issues we had that initial fall was that it was too popular. There wasn't enough skatable space to accommodate the demand. So we're actually working on an expansion now that will expand the skate park to the south underneath the Frederick Douglass Susan B. Anthony Bridge, basically double the scale of the park. So hopefully alleviate those issues. And then the following spring, before it reopened in the spring, obviously COVID came along and caused other issues that we're still dealing with. So Riverside Convention Center, North Terrace, Riverside Convention Center on the left, river on the right. You're looking from Main Street south. So that's the aqueduct in the background, Broad Street Bridge. So this was basically replaced this full terrace. The river wall had some failure, had to be replaced. The deck itself was leaking into some of the mechanical and storage spaces for the convention center that are housed under here. So it gave us a chance to rip this off, solve problems in the convention center, but also provide new pedestrian riverfront access, public access along the river. This extends down only partway to Aqueduct. There's another project coming online that'll extend it further south that I'll show you in a minute. Blue Cross Arena, Exchange Boulevard additions. You know, it's on the river. So we're able to capture some funds to do some critical infrastructure here for this community asset. Not really impactful on the river itself, but you know, it's a piece of downtown infrastructure. Rundell Library North Terrace. So Rundell Library, our historic building, historic structure. The North Terrace, a pretty significant public space built over the aqueduct. So this lower level, basically this line here was the original height of the aqueduct. This upper section was built when the light rail system came through after the canal was rerouted south of downtown. So the upper bridge deck is what we know today. This terrace is built over all that. There's still water flowing. This water actually comes from that original Johnson Seymour mill race I was mentioning earlier. Still flows under aqueduct or Broad Street in the aqueduct into an RG&E building here before it ultimately spills back out into the river. But this plaza here was closed off. It was structurally unsound. All kinds of issues. It was actually barricaded, fencing all around it, keep people off it because it was not safe to walk on or drive a vehicle on. So this is being fully reconstructed. This should be opening in the next month or so. Pretty significant public piece of art that was sourced early on through a request for proposal process, pretty lengthy selection process. was able to bring that artist on to work with the design team throughout the design of the space to kind of make it a unified experience. And then this big sweeping overlook. Right now, you got a concrete Jersey barrier wall that extends along here. You really can't see the river unless you go up to it and peek over. You know, we're actually bringing this terrace right up to the river, building a new structure that kind of overhangs the river and steps down. It's down in height a little bit, so you can actually get unobstructed views of the river corridor. So that'll be a fantastic addition. A couple images of construction, and here you can see the railing in at the lower overlook, so you get these big panoramic views of the entire area between the aqueduct, the War Memorial, and Court Street, and areas to the south. Charles Carroll Plaza, this is between Main Street over here and Andrew Street. This park just happens to be over a parking garage, a city-owned parking garage, which has some significant leakage issues. So if you go out there today, the entire existing park has been stripped off of here down to the garage roof. A new waterproofing system will be added back to that, and the new park built on top. Sister Cities Bridge that connects across for pedestrians has been reconstructed and rebuilt. Prior to the rebuild, it was not accessible. There was no way for disabled to get on the bridge. There was pretty significant flights of stairs at either end, both east and west sides of the river. Through the project, we were able to do these flyovers and terrace the park so that you have seamless access from the park across the bridge on both sides. This is under construction, slated for late 2023 or early 2024 completion. Main Street Resurgence, not funded by Rock the Riverway, but integral to the experience of the Riverway. Obviously, the river crosses Main Street, pretty significant confluence with the river, right in the center here, Genesee River. We completed phase 1 of this in 2019 that went from St. Paul east to Liberty Pole. Current under construction phase goes from St. Paul over to State Street. Last time this section of Main Street, Main Street through downtown within the inner loop was rebuilt was 1987, 1988. So it's been 30 plus years. It's tired, it's outdated. Was built for much greater car traffic than we experience today. So we're able to reconfigure this entire space to, one, play up the river crossing and the bridge space over the river, but also to offer more pedestrian and bicycle access along the length. So this is under construction, completion later this year. Phase 3 will extend this west if and when we have money, which hopefully will be coming soon. West River Wall, this is Cornhill Landing in the north to Ford Street Bridge in the south. Exchange Boulevard is the road here. If you've been down there prior to this project being under construction, there was literally a flood wall that prevented you from seeing any portion of the river as you traveled down here, either on bike on the trail or in a car. You never would have known a river was there because all you saw was, volunteer vegetation backed up by a crumbling river wall. But through the process and the project, we were able to significantly lower the height of that wall. We still meet all the flood protection measures, flood protection heights, all reviewed by FEMA, reviewed and approved. We were able to prove a couple things here. The wall that was existing was in such bad shape that last time FEMA did their flood mapping, there were breaches in the wall, and some pretty significant sections of Cornhill were identified as being in a flood zone, which forced those homeowners to pay for national flood insurance. Through this project, we were able to reestablish the appropriate flood elevation, prove that those homes would be taken out of the floodway, and they no longer have to pay for those insurances. But more importantly, we're giving views and access directly to the river. You can see some sections of the wall are there, but more the northern section, we were able to take that wall right down and provide access directly to the water. And the berm that's here, we no longer need the wall because we have an engineered berm that the trail runs along that serves as the flood protection measure. Directly across the river from Ford Street North, you have the Erie Harbor Phase 2 project. 1970s era park project. It really hasn't been touched since, except for some environmental remediation. That Genesee feeder canal that went from Brooks Landing, the rapids there, came up along this east bank to the Erie Canal to keep the waters in the Erie Canal water elevation steady. Came through directly through this park site. And once that was gone, you had multiple layers of railroad tracks and other industries. So there was some pretty significant contamination. Late 90s, early 2000s, some major remediation projects came in, removed a lot of soil and disrupted, the existing parkland. So we're finally able to start stitching it back together. And then obviously the Genesee Riverway Trail is continuous throughout the park, north and south. This is under construction now. We broke ground last Monday and is scheduled for completion in late summer 2023. Brewery Line Trail, you can see High Falls in the background, Interloop North section here, CSX's main line through. This is one of Rochester's oldest parks, High Falls Terrace Park. And we have a trail that goes along the top of the gorge edge here, connects the Pontarens Bridge along the gorge edge. The section between that trail and the park is a former rail line. We were able to acquire that. That rail line basically fed goods to the Genesee Brewery right here, and then took their beers away to market. That's been inactive for a while. We were able to acquire it, the corridor. We're able to move this trail back from the gorge edge due to significant erosion issues and make some formal connections to the park here. Definitely worth a trip when this reopens. Just spectacular views of the gorge and the falls here. Cornhill Navigation is finally getting a boat back on the river for excursions, tours, that kind of thing. They do a lot of work just open to the public in general, but do a lot of work with our local school districts and bringing kids onto the river and experiencing a trip down the river that they never would experience otherwise. They finally, through contributions from Rock the Riverway, but also through pretty significant fundraising efforts, have been able to buy a boat that's currently under construction. I believe Albany, Troy area it's being built, and then will be brought down here. And I'm told by fall of this year, it will be back docked here at Cornhill Landing to start giving tours again. So great news on that end. So those are current projects in engineering and design. Aqueduct Reimagined, like I said, this is the linchpin of the whole Rock the Riverway. So this is north to the right hand side, south to the left. The aqueduct, which is Broad Street, will be brought down. That upper road deck will be removed, brought back down to the historic canal level, which does a couple things. It allows the Genesee Riverway Trail to flow seamlessly at grade, continuously across. So currently the trail comes up both sides of the river to Court Street. There are segments, bits and pieces that extend, across the War Memorial. You have Aqueduct Park, and then Charles Carroll Park up here, and another trail section in Charles Carroll Park on the east bank. But there's not that connectivity, and the aqueduct, the height of the aqueduct made it impossible to make these connections. So by taking it down, we'll be able to make those seamless connections. You'll have continuous trail across both banks of the river. And the other thing it does, if you stand on Court Street or Main Street now, you can see the Broad Street Bridge, but the view shed stops there. By taking that down, you'll have that seamless view shed down the entire length of the corridor throughout the downtown area. Skate Park Phase 2 and 3. The red area is Phase 1 that is complete and open. If you get a chance to go out there, it's fantastic. It's great to watch. I wouldn't do it. You wouldn't catch me dead on a skateboard there, but it's great to watch the skaters and bikers and rollerbladers, scooter riders. It's phenomenal. Nothing but positive news. All the generations helping each other out. It's been great. So the blue areas are phase 2. You can see basically doubles the skatable area under the bridge. So it's usable while it's raining. In the winter, if it's not too harsh out, not a lot of snow, they'll be able to skate under there year round. Talking about inclusion of a restroom building, concession stand, so that when they do host events here, and the Friends of the Rock City Skate Park are pretty confident they can bring in some touring, professional skating things, some competitions for local and national competitions. And we need to provide restrooms, concession stand, and also some events and staging area. So that is in design as we speak. And we'll be working on that for, probably the rest of the season through 2023. And then we're working on the funding portion to actually fund construction. Blue Cross Arena Riverside expansion. Not heavily involved in this, but this is kind of a complementary piece to the Exchange Streets, the Exchange Street expansion that I showed earlier. Just some quick renderings of that. Basically, it's a pretty nondescript building now. The hope is to make it more of an iconic kind of a lighthouse along the Riverway corridor. So this tower obviously actually projects out away from the building, and it'll, nighttime, it'll be a pretty iconic piece, kind of a light tower along the length of the corridor through downtown. Riverside expansion, the terrace that I showed you earlier is kind of this gray section here that is complete from Main Street to the northern extent of that terrace now. The Riverside expansion project and terrace addition is developing some additional an expanded building footprint for some additional internal space to the library or the convention center, and also providing a new expanded riverfront promenade to extend that the full length of the building. And then once the aqueduct project comes on, the aqueduct project will connect from here to the aqueduct itself. This is the section east side of the river, north of Main Street. So this is the Main Street Bridge in the background. North is behind us, so we're looking south. Just once again, that seamless trail connection on both sides of the river. Inner Loop North, once again, not a Rock the Riverway project, but integral to connectivity to the river and the trail system and the park system along the river. So here's High Falls, Inner Loop North. And if you're familiar with Inner Loop East, it's complete, basically took that 16 lane, between the upper at grade roadways and the sunken roadway. Sorry about that. Basically brought it up to grade, made it an urban boulevard, and we're able to create 7 development sites that are currently all under construction. Similar treatment is proposed for Inner Loop North, with a focus on connectivity to the riverway. Just a kind of before and after image. So this is St. Paul Street, St. Paul underpass in the background. You can see 6+ lanes of traffic, on St. Paul itself. Chance to kind of more humanize this experience, restitch some of the neighborhoods. And then probably one of the more exciting pieces, once again, not Rock the Riverway funded, but directly an outgrowth of Rock the Riverway, is the proposed High Falls State Park. The state has committed pretty close to $100 million to make this a reality. So on the left side, you have High Falls right here, Browns Race, High Falls Historic District, Genesee Brewery, Ponterens Bridge, Smith Street Bridge, and the Rochester Running Track Bridge. So High Falls State Park is essentially everything in the gorge. The only piece that will be above gorge level, top side of the gorge, will be High Falls State Park. Once that project is completed by the city, that'll be turned over to the state, first part of the state park. But they're currently working, State Parks is currently working to hire a project design team to actually begin actual design of this facility. And just an incredible opportunity. A lot of environmental cleanup to happen down here. Our Geneva historic footprint on this area and a good portion of this site down here has has some pretty significant contamination that has, many years of cleanup ahead of it before a park actually happens down here. But the state has committed money to it and is putting their full force behind it. So I assume there will be some pretty heavy public rollout of this as it starts to develop. So look forward to those public input sessions to give you 2 cents on what you'd like to see down here. Some early renderings that the state developed. So, getting right down in the gorge, at this point, you're, 100 foot from the falls, you'll be able to get sprayed by the mist and get the full experience of, the gorge walls surrounding you. This is a vantage point that most people have never seen before, anything down here. So if you've been down here or when you get a chance to get down here, do so. It's pretty spectacular. Another view, that's Smith Street Bridge in the background. But, renaturalizing the shoreline, getting people access right to the water. See natural playgrounds in the background. Former smokestack here, Rochester Incinerator Building. It's been in private hands for a number, but it was originally the city of Rochester's waste incineration building. The state is hoping to acquire that and repurpose it for an ecological education center and kind of visitor center. So not sure if the building's salvageable or not, but it's something they're investigating. And then this is north of Smith Street Bridge. There's the smokestack again and Smith Street Bridge. So this is north on the east bank of the river, just naturalizing the shoreline, providing access, some spectacular rock faces on the West River wall here. Just some incredible opportunities. And then, this is a city initiative we've been looking at for a while. High Falls Historic District up here, the city owns the former visitor center and museum. That's currently under redevelopment for a new visitor center, restrooms, that kind of thing. And we actually were in development to provide access down to the gorge area with this elevator access, viewing platform, elevator access, before the state announced their High Falls State Park. But we still plan on going forward with this because, those who are walking around High Falls, it's quite a walk to, if you wanted to walk down to the gorge or instead of driving your car down. So you'll have a vertical access point. All right, with all that said, that's great, but where can I paddle? So Mike had mentioned this earlier, Genesee Waterway Center, southern extreme of the river corridor in Genesee Valley Park. Organization that's been here for years and years and years. Basically, we're able to repurpose this former parks maintenance building to suit their needs. Over the years, they put up a couple satellite storage buildings that they run their programs out of. They currently, I think last I was aware, they have somewhere between 14 to 16 rowing programs out of here. And that's high school, college, senior programs. They run programs for city school district. There's all kinds of programs that run out of here, hundreds of people in and out. And they also run a livery out of here. So their agreement with the city, this is in Genesee Valley Park, city-owned building. They operate out of here under a licensing agreement. And part of that agreement is that they have to have allow public access to the docks here, but they also run a livery. So you can come down here, rent a canoe or kayak, and get your personal flotation device and your oar and, some minor instruction and, be on your way onto the river. Obviously all different levels of rowing and docks, but public accessible. You can pull your car in here, drop your canoe and kayak off, park your car in the parking right there, and hop right on the water. Some of these docks, I think these floating hexagonal docks were just replaced or in the process of being replaced. So this is a great place to row. I think the river here is 250, 260 feet wide, usually relatively minor flows. Looking south here, just beyond this, you have the confluence with the canal. So you can paddle south to Black Creek, down to the canal and to the east to Red Creek, or along the canal itself, or head north and head up towards downtown. So great asset here. The other part with this, we did a 2015 master plan at Genesee Valley Park that looked at the entire west bank of Genesee Valley Park. Redevelopment of the entire park to meet current needs. But a big portion of that was looking at the Genesee Waterway Center and analyzing their programs and their needs. And basically, you know, we sat with them through many meetings, figuring out what their programming needs were, what their space needs were. Also with the city's parks department and what their needs were. And with the master plan, we came up with some conceptual diagrams and drawings of what a new boathouse could look like and what the needs were. So 2-story structure, fitness room / multi-purpose space, pretty sizable to, you know, fitness for the rowing programs, locker rooms, changing rooms, shower rooms, restrooms, kitchen space, multi-purpose rentable space for weddings, birthdays, community events, plenty of office space and storage, lobby, and you know, space for the rowing programs to meet and operate out of. Lower level, which is at the river level. You can have rental space for the livery, for canoe and kayak rentals, bike rental. You can have an ice cream shop, you know, whatever the case may be. And then obviously the river level is largely taken up by 7 boat bays, potentially expandable to 9 with the current footprint of the building. So did some visioning, kind of came up with some ideas to keep the character of the building consistent with the larger park aesthetic. A lot of natural materials, a lot of transparency so that when you're in the park, you can see through the building to the river, always have that connection to the river. Green roofs, lots of outdoor terrace space so that you can, you know, experience the park and the river as you're in or utilizing the building. And then some more refined drawings just showing the character and style. So this looking from the north to the south, river would be on your left. These boat bays would spill out onto a big paved area so they can work on the boats, prep them, clean them when they come back off the water. So that was developed in 2015. We currently have a request for proposals out to take these designs to the schematic level, reassess the 2015 recommendations, see if they're still valid, and then develop some schematic level drawings and estimates so that we can use that to start actually looking for, you know, go out and do some hat in hand fundraising to the state, federal, and the local rowing community to try to raise funds to build this facility. So that's a very exciting. So we're actually have a proposal out now. We're actually out next week, I believe. And so later this summer, we should start design. And, you know, it's pretty exciting that we can actually be implementing this new boathouse. It's much needed. Going up the river to the west side, so Plymouth Avenue here, Genesee Street in the background, another public-private partnership project. Staybridge Suites Extended Stay Hotel was built, and student housing tower largely houses University of Rochester students. This was developed in conjunction. The city, redeveloped the streetscape and the connections from the neighborhood to the river along the street. A big open public plaza that's used for events. There's public artwork coming to the circle here, but then developed the 30 to 60 foot wide river frontage that we maintained to carry the Genesee Riverway Trail through. But also that includes 175 foot long wharf structure that projects into the river. For at this point, it only serves motorized watercraft. It's 2-tier, this lower level for, you know, smaller scale personal motorboats. Upper level intended to serve more kind of touring, canal, and touring vessels, so that Cornhill Navigation can take their craft down and, you know, make a stop here. As this was being developed, there was hope that there would be shops and restaurants in here and other development around the neighborhood. that, stops, you could stop here and get out and go and visit those sites. But there is accessibility built in to either end of this dock or the wharf structure so that we could connect floating docks sometime in the future, so that we could ramp down closer to river level and have some floating docks. So you could get a canoe or kayak in the water here. Moving up again, West River Wall, segment 2, vacuum oil boa plan. This is the vacuum oil boa site. So Ford Street on the north, pedestrian crossing bridge here, former railroad crossing. It's now converted to pedestrian use. And then Plymouth Avenue is off to the north there. This is the vacuum oil boa site. Vacuum oil was a oil manufacturer, manufactured oil and all their lubrication products on this site. And it actually was the forerunner, was bought out by successive corporations and is now ExxonMobil. So through their operations and other uses on site, there's some pretty heavy contamination. The river frontage is and will remain public parkland, but after cleanup, there's some pretty significant private development that can happen, some private development sites that will be opened up and can happen. But from these building faces to the river is all public parkland and will remain that. There's still years of environmental remediation, or next year or two, environmental remediation will be happening. Some pretty significant excavations and removals. And then we're in design for extension of the West River Wall segment 1 from Ford Street north. We'll be carrying those improvements from Ford Street south. Once again, rebuilding the river wall to Flint Street here, and then naturalizing the shoreline, from point to the point south. And part of those improvements, what you're seeing here is the 2019 Parks Open Recreation, Parks Open Space and Waterfront Master Plan. Heavily involved with the neighborhood, the Plex neighborhood, 19th Ward neighborhood to the west here. They wanted to capitalize on our water frontage, be able to get waters, both motorized craft docking, but also access to put in canoes and kayaks. So we're looking at that at the foot of Flint Street with a associated parking area. We're also working with the Rochester Fire Department. They're our first responders to any incidents in the water on the Genesee River. They have a trailered, partially inflatable boat that they use for access. They do not have a place to put in without, pulling up wherever they can along the shoreline and manually getting it in the water. The closest trailered boat access point is Black Creek, well south of Rochester. So obviously if there's an emergency in the river between here and downtown, that is not ideal. So we'll be working with them to see if there's a space here where we could provide trailered boat access. Probably not a public access, and probably restricted to the fire department and DEC agencies like that, but the need is there. We're also looking to see if there's a place where they could have their boat permanently located, have a hoist or a little boat building that they could get out of the water in inclement weather. So we're working on that as well. West River Wall Phase 1, Ford Street to Cornhill Landing in the north here. With this rebuild, largely the paddling facility here was already in place. When Cornhill was redeveloped, we installed a parking area open to the public 24/7 here. And there's been a floating dock in this section of the river for 15 to 20 years. Was in pretty rough shape. So the West River Wall project that's now under construction, just about complete, replaced that. So you have a much better brand new floating dock platform there, fully accessible. And then directly across the river, the Erie Harbor project that's under construction right now. We have 4 state grants that are funding this project, including the Rock the Riverway funds. But the Rock the Riverway funds primary focus in this project is to provide in-water access. This East River Wall, just a quick history, late 90s, there was a pretty significant collapse of the wall, and it was rebuilt with, pedestrian promenade right along the river with varying elevations from the water. Genesee Riverway Trail continuous throughout. All that was rebuilt. A series of terraced overlooks were put in. And at that time, a floating dock system was put in, basically so the neighborhood could carry a boat over and get it in the water. That lasted about a year and a half. What we didn't take into account at the time was that the sweep in the river that comes around pushes all the pretty significant logs and other debris to this side of the river. So this floating dock on the west side, where it stays relatively free. This has never been taken out of the water. It stays there year round. Ice hasn't damaged it. Debris stays clear of it. Siltation hasn't been an issue. But this east side just got hammered right away, ripped it basically off its moorings. We re-secured it, but it lasted about a year and a half, 2 years. Taken out early 2000s, and there hasn't been anything there since. So we're trying a different approach. Instead of building something into the river, we are going to basically, gets a little fuzzy there, but basically we're going to create a bay, cut into the river wall in the trail there, and flood a small area so you have a ramp down concrete walkway into the river. We do have some debris deflection piles that will be installed upstream so that as these logs come down, they're deflected around and bypass this area. We don't think there'll be significant siltation issues here. River was pretty low earlier this year, and the siltation stopped, significantly, a couple hundred yards to the south of this site. So we should be in a pretty good location here, and I'm pretty excited for this to come online. It's a pretty unique approach. So this little graphic in this image, inset image, you can see that we're cutting down the existing wall and rail to provide different levels of access into the water here. And once again, through the design of this, we've worked with the fire department to make sure that they can get their trailer into this site so they can deploy as quickly as possible. And we were able to get a most recent grant from the Department of State to provide an access point from Mount Hope Avenue out here. We realized that putting this here, people aren't going to drag a canoe or kayak from parking on Mount Hope Avenue or from the neighborhood. There will be people that will, but most people won't. So it was critical, and we heard this from the public as we were developing these plans, that we needed a drop-off point and parking to support this boat launch to make it successful. So the city owns this empty development site just to the north of the park, and we'll be putting in an access point from Mount Hope Avenue to connect in an access drive that'll come to basically a big loop where you can drop off your canoe or kayak and take it down to the launch, and then there'll be parking area along the park here where you can drop your car off and go enjoy your paddle. So that we got that grant through the 2021 CFA program, just getting the agreement in place, and we'll be designing this through the fall and hopefully construct it as part of the park improvements. And also at this site, we talked about doing actual building on the city development site here, and hoping that they will provide some room in their building for rentable space for canoe and kayak and bike rental. But we're looking for solutions in the interim where we can, provide other ways to get people on the water. And Genesee Waterway Center actually pointed this out to us, that there is a company in Texas that makes these kayak kiosks. Blew our minds. It seems like tailor-made for what we need. We have all the park space we need. We have plenty of room to put in something like this. We have power to the site, but they can be solar powered. So basically, this is a standalone station out on site. You come up, swipe your credit card, tell it how long you want to rent for, how many kayaks you want. As soon as you're paid, it opens up, the appropriate lockers and unlocks your kayak. Get your paddle, your personal flotation device, your kayak, and head in the water. Come back, lock it, secure it, and you're done. So we applied last year for a CFA grant to fund the acquisition and installation of these. We were not successful. We will refine our proposal and try to get that grant now that our project's under construction. Hopefully we'll be successful. And if we are successful, I would expect we would have these deployed on site in the 2024 season. And one other piece, and we're back up to the High Falls section of the Rock the Riverway. This is more of a challenging site, but I've also, also thrown this recommendation out to the state when we've met with them, when they were looking for early ideas of what should and could happen down in this section as they're developing the park. I don't think anybody's ever paddled on here, or certainly most people haven't paddled on here, but I think there's some great opportunities. There are some significant challenges with the High Falls up in the northern end here, and RG&E's hydro generation station that still exists here at High Falls, and some of their, tail races. Obviously, we got to stay clear of that. And then also in the north at Middle Falls, they do have another intake here at their Middle Falls Dam that we'd have to keep people away from. But there's a pretty significant stretch of river here that, could be open to paddling under certain conditions when the water's just right. So hoping to push this on the state. Don't know how receptive they'll be. I know RG&E has heartburn when they hear these kind of things, but we'll work on them over the years. And there's also a chance, you can see the island right here under the Pontarens Bridge. So this island kind of splits the river into two channels. One that's, more natural flow on, the east side, but the west kind of channel has a little dam structure at the end. If that was removed, I think there's some excellent opportunities for, a whitewater course here. I think there's some fantastic opportunities for that. We had looked in years past, kind of developed some concept plans for the South River corridor for a whitewater course. It was pretty adventuresome undertaking, and certainly feasible, but I think the costs were astronomical, and obviously it never happened. But here I think you've got a relatively ready-made natural channel that could work. So hopefully somewhere down the line this can be a possibility. And one more slide here. The other piece, we recognize that there are major safety issues with people being on the river. RG&E, I said, their Court Street Dam right here, they have a pretty significant intake. The power station, brings in water to Station 26 to power their power generation activities here. They already have a barrier float. I think regulation requires it to be 300 feet from any intake point. So that intake point here, 300 feet south, it really doesn't show up well, but there is a floating buoy system that RG&E maintains. So obviously no boating past this point, but we're working with RG&E, the New York State Canal Corp, and the fire department to develop this management, safety, and emergency access plan, so that as we're inviting people onto the water in the South River corridor, we know they're already allowed to go there. We've had facilities on the river for decades now, but as we invite more people on, it's going to bring in more issues, whether it's a stalled motorboat or a capsized kayak or canoe. Who knows what can happen. We want to make sure we have the ability to respond to those conditions, and so we're working on this management, safety, and emergency access plan over the next year to get that in place as the Erie Harbor project comes online. And that's what I have. So happy to take questions, answer anything you got.
Terrific, Jeff.
Yeah.
Are there plans for stabilizing the canyon walls in the park area?
You're talking about the High Falls area?
Yeah, below High Falls.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's highly friable material. Just water gets into the cracks. We have pretty good experience dealing with it in the High Falls area here, the Gorse Line building.
Mm-hmm.
We did, private developer developed the Gorse Line building. We had our High Falls Festival site there. We have an overlook right on the promontory overlooking the falls. And we did some, a pin system to try to tie back that wall, make sure it stayed stable, but water just suffuses right through every crack and every pore and every crevice of that. And we re-secured and retightened those, regrouted those tieback anchors, I think twice, and just kept failing. One of the gorge edge buildings actually had to be abandoned because a fissure opened up between it and the larger gorge wall. So there are ways to do it. It's just expensive and constant maintenance. Nature's going to take its course one way or the other. So I think the hope would be to keep people away from those areas where you have some crumbling wall. There's a lot of acreage down here. I think I read it's 40 acres between this northern section and southern section. So there's plenty of space down here. The southern section, you're not really near any gorge wall. It's a vegetated slope for the most part. It's across the river where the gorge is very vertical. And then, High Falls area has some very, extreme vertical slopes on it, but there's ways to keep people away from those.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I didn't realize there's so much going on. That was a great overview. I didn't realize you hear little bits and pieces, but until you see it all together, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, and I didn't show every project. I, omitted a few, like Ponteren's Bridge here is under, reconstruction.
Yeah.
And the running track bridge is having a stabilization project right now, but we're looking for funds to convert that to trail. So the El Camino Trail, the former corridor, extends through the Avenue D and Conkey Avenue neighborhood, north to south. That's already converted to trail. That's hugely successful. And that's been in place for 12 years now. Eventually we'll convert the bridge to pedestrian access, and we already own the corridor on this side, so we'll be able to connect right south to the High Falls area.
Cool.
So a few of the things I haven't shown, and there's other projects involved that just didn't want to get into too much.
Thanks.
Yeah, well, it's a lot.
There's a lot going on.
All right.
Well, thanks for the hangers on. Appreciate it. And the presenters. Guess we'll wrap it up. We will post the recordings at sometime next month when we get them all together and can manage the large files and get them set up on YouTube and send out a notice to everybody so you'll know when they're up. Okay.
All right.
Right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, George. Thanks, Mike.
Yep. Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Yep.